Hello, everybody. I'm Logan Crawford, and welcome to a special edition of the Emmy Award-winning talk show right here on Ebru Fresh Outlook. Today, we're going to be talking about faith and a number of issues making headlines around the world, including the Muslim pushback against ISIS/ISIL. We're also going to be talking about faith and gender equality, faith and environmentalism as well. But first, let's start with our top topic, which is 120 top voices in the Muslim world speaking out, denouncing what is happening in the Middle East, specifically Iraq and Syria, with the actions of ISIL. We have a news package to show you. Let's take a look.
Over 100 international Islamic scholars and Muslim leaders have issued an open letter in Arabic to offer a religious point-by-point refutation to ISIL ideology.
Everything they're doing is un-Islamic. Just about every act is forbidden in our faith. So if someone does everything contrary to the faith, how is it the media continues to link them to Islam?
The Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, along with the Fiqh Council of North America, held a news conference in Washington, D.C. to highlight the open letter to reporters.
It is forbidden in Islam to kill the innocent. Jihad in Islam is defensive war only. It is not permissible without the right cause, the right purpose, and without the right rules of conduct.
Speakers at the news conference said a military campaign will not be enough to defeat the organization.
Another 10 years of bombing is also not going to work. We have to have something we have to go to the root of the problem.
To rebuild societies, we need to focus on education and diplomatic and political solutions.
ISIL has taken over wide swaths of Syria and Iraq in a brutal assault and a bid to establish what it calls a caliphate.
And we just told you about 120 Muslim leaders from across the globe speaking out against ISIL. We have a number of voices right here in our Ebru studios here today speaking out against ISIL as well. Among them are Dr. Walter Wagner of Moravian Theological Seminary. We have Imam Shamsi Ali of the Jamaican Muslim Center. And we have Professor Daniel Friedheim. There we go, I got it right. Of Drexel University, an expert on international politics. Imam Shamsi Ali, I'm going to begin with you.
Sure.
What is your reaction to this letter being signed by religious leaders such as yourself?
First, I have to express my gratitude, and certainly I'm very happy to see that finally Muslims are visible. I know that from 2001, after the tragic event that happened here in New York City, so a lot of Muslim scholars have out loud condemned the terrorist attack, but unfortunately it's not visible in the media particularly. But I think the case that we have right now is very visible. Almost all Muslim countries condemn it. Muslim organizations, mainstream Muslim organizations, all mosques here in New York and the United States, all Muslims are condemning the actions of this ISIS. And I think the next step, what we need is really to educate our community that what ISIL or ISIS is doing is not only that is against Islam, but it's damaging Islam basically. It is damaging Islam. So I'm very happy to see these condemnations and also the next step that we are going to do, educating our community that ISIS and ISIL's, I call that enemies of Islam, because Islam's destroy, if I may say. You know, Muslims in the United States, particularly in the West in general, have been struggling to build this positive image of the religion because of what had been, done by certain people who claim to be even better Muslims. Right. And all of a sudden, these people claim to, again, representing Islam, doing all things that basically contradict to what Islam stands for. It's about freedom, tolerance, brotherhood, friendship, partnership, respect the rights of others, respect the women. They are doing every single thing that is against the teaching of Islam in the name of Islam. So I call this Islam's destroyer, and they claim to be heroic.
And President Barack Obama and the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon have been very clear on this as well. ISIS is not Islam. ISIL is not Islam. There is not an Islamic State. I think Ban Ki-moon put it very well. He said this is a non-Islamic movement and this is a non-Islamic state. Tell me, Dr. Wagner, a little bit about your reaction to Fethullah Gulen's letter condemning the actions of ISIL. Are you familiar with it? I'm not sure.
There was in the New York Times and the Washington Post, as well as in some other newspapers, where Fethullah Gulen of the Hizmet movement issued a very strong condemnation of ISIL, and I think it was a brief but yet pungent statement saying you cannot be a Muslim and a terrorist at the same time. Mm-hmm. These are mutually contradictory. His position, as well as the position of Hizmet, that international social movement, is precisely in education, peace, development of dialogue and mutual cooperation between different religious organizations. I think that considering I have read the statement of the 120 persons, and I think he would be in total agreement with every one of the 24 points. It's a rather lengthy document. Mm-hmm. Of the 24 points, that this is, for Christians, this would be like having the Ku Klux Klan represent Christianity.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Every religion has its fanatic fringe. We have people bombing abortion clinics in the name of Christianity, and certainly that is not a Christian action. Let me move over to Dr. Daniel Friedheim for just a second. I know you're not a religious expert, but you are a political expert. And what's your take on all of this from a political aspect?
Well, this is the acts of violence by ISIS, or ISIL, whatever we're going to call them.
Or Daesh, as the French call them, because that's a derogatory term that they don't want to be called, which will be adopted by the station eventually, but go ahead.
Well, their advance clearly could only have been stopped by a group of countries getting together and taking a stand and acting against them. And that's what President Obama has taken the lead on organizing, a coalition of countries, some European allies, importantly some Arab countries also participating in pushing back ISIL. And he made the case for that at the UN, and at the UN Security Council, which also met and passed a resolution condemning at least the recruitment of people from around the world into the movement. And this statement by the religious leaders is just crucial to show that fighting back against ISIL is not fighting Islam.
Exactly. I actually think, and I thought this when President Barack Obama was first elected, to have a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-racial president for the United States at this time when we are such a country that is multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-religion, that he represents that so well. And Imam Shamsi Ali, let me ask you this. He does seem to be the right man for the right time to bring the right message to the world and put together a coalition of nations, including Arab nations, to defeat ISIL.
I think that is the appropriate way of dealing with the issue, and I think even if it is expanded to the other non-Muslim nations such as Indonesia, because I think in defeating the ISIS in long term, it is not only militarily. I think we need other efforts, including education, particularly in educating our youngs, who are being right now targeted by the ISIS people through internet, through misinformation, through delivering different kind of concept. Looks like beautiful.
And people are exploited. They're told that we're oppressed, we're kept down, that the West is imposing false values upon us and are ruining our lives. And to somebody who's economically depressed, that message resonates.
There are frustrations in the Muslim world, among particularly the youngs. They need change. They want change. And so they're desperate of changes. And the governments, the Muslim governments, are basically very slow in doing such. And so this kind of frustration basically contribute into this. They are very easily targeted by these kind of groups who have their own political agenda. So I think by involving Muslims, particularly those who are in the field of education, the imams and the scholars, and I'm truly happy to see these Muslim scholars stand up very strongly against ISIS agenda, I think it's very, very important. Economic development, educational development, and so on and so forth, but more importantly, open up opportunities for the Muslims to express themselves, particularly those who are in the Arab world. You know, unless you are giving them rights, unless you are giving them freedom, it is difficult to imagine in the long term to change. Because you may kill terrorists, but you cannot kill terrorism unless you change the minds of the people. So I think by involving the scholars and the Muslims worldwide and minimizing, putting them in the spot of suspicion in many ways, I think that is the best way to handle this kind of groups, ISIS, yeah.
Absolutely. Dr. Wagner, let me talk to you a little bit more about the statement from the leader of the Hizmet movement, Dr. Fethullah Gulen. How important was that statement, and what is the crux of it?
I think the statement particularly addresses Americans in terms that Americans would understand. That is to say, it is brief, it is to the point, it is clear. The statement by the 120 is a statement that would be clear and understandable to a Muslim audience.
Or to a scholar, perhaps,
well,
who's familiar with the Quran.
Yes, assuming that in all of the areas of those 24 sections, quoting of the Quran and the Hadith materials, quoting the tradition, is very important for that audience to tell them that you're being misled by the ISIL people who got it all wrong.
Tell me some of the key tenets of that 24 points. What were some of the key tenets of those points?
There were, I believe, if I read it somewhat, getting it in English, of course,
right.
For it, that there were. It begins with quotations from ISIL leaders, especially the self-appointed caliph and some of his other leaders, and then it goes point by point to refute each one of those statements, saying on basis of Quran, this is what they are saying is wrong and misleading you. That, particularly for the young, for the impressionable, would be important. What Gulen's statement does is to speak to an audience that is not Muslim, where we have asked very frequently, most Americans have asked, where is the Muslim voice? Well, that is a clear Muslim voice, along with the voices of other Islamic groups in the United States, nationally as well as locally.
Let me just interrupt you and let me bring Dr. Friedheim into the conversation. As an observer, as a political expert, do you think the statements from people like Fethullah Gulen and from the Muslim scholars and imams, is it effective? Is the message getting across? Is the American community in particular hearing those words?
No, it seems like that message is coming through loud and clear, perhaps even louder and clearer than after 9/11, as the Imam was mentioning. I also wanted to follow up one of the Imam's points about the discontent amongst the populace in the Arab world having deep economic and political roots, and point out that the other Muslim countries around the world, including Turkey, where Mr. Gulen is, Indonesia, where you're from, are proving that you can develop and there's hope economically, and that you can even open up politically too. And that should give some hope to Arab countries now.
Let me just turn to the Imam for just a second and ask you, give me a couple of sections of the Quran where it talks to being a peaceful religion and a religion that seeks justice.
The whole idea of the Holy Quran is peace, basically, and any other thing is either emergency or deviation. So war, either it is a kind of emergency situation or deviation. War in Islam is not permitted. It is not permitted on a normal situation. So I used to say, to express in this very simple way to the kids, if someone come and want to kill you, what are you going to do? They say, I have to fight back. I say, not yet. You have to smile and shake hands and say, I'm sorry if I have made a mistake. Oh, so if they insist to kill you, say, I have to fight back. Say, not yet. Run away. The Holy Quran says in Arabic, turn away from them. You don't have to see their faces. Just run away. But if they follow you to kill you, then what are you going to do? Then I have to face them and fight back.
A good lesson for children of the Muslim faith and all faiths, as a matter of fact. You're watching a special edition of Fresh Outlook. We are talking about faith and some issues making headlines. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the ugly reemergence of Islamophobia after this.